pulled the wrong one. We're going to call to order the Finance Committee. It's a standing committee and subcommittee consisting of 2 council members, currently Paul McCoy and Colleen Baker, and the city manager, city treasurer, and finance director. The Finance Committee considers and makes recommendations on matters referred to it by the city council relating to finance, budget, audits, capital planning, and debt. So I guess we need to do a flag salute. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now it's time for public comment. Hello, Skip. How are you? Public participation is limited on those items listed on the agenda. If your comments do not concern an item listed on the agenda, please address the committee at the next. Well, anyway, please address us at this meeting if you have things to say about the budget today. The city requests that persons addressing the Finance Committee refrain from making personal slanders, profane, or disruptive remarks. Committee members, when recognized by the committee chair, may ask questions from the presenter, but no action may be taken by the committee during the public comment section of the meeting. Under the Brown Act, the committee is prohibited from discussing or taking action on any item listed on the posted agenda. Please speak from the podium. Please state your name for the record prior to providing your comments. Please address the committee as a whole. If you have documents to present, please provide a minimum of 6 copies and please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Any public comment at all? Any? No? Okay. Is anybody online? Okay. This is a time for the Finance Committee, or this is public comment follow-up. This is a time for the Finance Committee or city manager to respond to public comments and may direct staff to prepare a report or place an item on a future agenda. Since there is no public comment, there's no follow-up. So we have one major thing on the docket and 2 other things that are not quite as major. So discussion 4A, the discussion updated budget process, which can be found online at https semicolon. Yeah. Isn't it semicolon www.ci.yreka.ca.us.capital DOCUMENT capital CENTER /capital INDEX /3 and the number 4.
Is that a colon or a semicolon?
Is that a semicolon?
It's got to be a colon.
It's a colon.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, folks. So, and if you need to hear that again, don't hesitate to call, go online and ask on the city webpage or call the city. So now we're going to turn it over to Miss Emily Aldrich for discussion of the update of the budget process.
Thank you, Paul. As we kind of discussed briefly at the council meeting, we went through the sections of the binder. As I encouraged the whole council, I encourage you guys as well to really focus your energies on the budget narrative and the departmental narratives, because it really kind of tells the story of what these numbers mean. If you guys have specific questions as to where exactly something's located, we can get into the detail and I can show you where that is. I would first like to direct you to the projected fund balances. And the second page kind of, yeah, we can start on the first page. That would work. Sorry.
Do you, the public copy is in the foyer?
Correct. It is, it's at the front desk and is available for review. Would you like me to grab that?
Would
for
you like to
Skip?
follow along with that?
Oh, okay. So your first page you have here, this is kind of the snapshot of where we think we're ending in 22-23, where we think we're going to end in 23-24. So the column all the way to the right, it says ending working capital. These are my projected fund balances at the end of 23-24. So as you can see, we don't project any negative fund balances, which is Perfect. We don't want to do that. We are using some of our reserves, but we have plans to replace some of those in the following year. Which is the second page is the 24-25. So same concept. So we start on the left with how much money we're going to bring in, how much money is being transferred around. So general fund backfills, say street projects or capital projects, say for this building, we would be backfilling any grant funding that falls short of what's needed. So we have estimated those figures there. The next group of columns is what we're proposing to spend, including those transfers out. And so the overall expense. So my total proposed budget is the following column. That's the difference between the two. As you can see, some of those proposed budgets have more expenses than revenues. So, and then we estimate our beginning working capital, as you guys are aware. I haven't closed out 22-23. I'm not even allowed to do that until September sometime, to make sure we capture all the expenses in the appropriate period. And gives you kind of an increase, decrease based on the budget. And then again, our ending working capital for fund balances. So this really is your snapshot in a total bucket to bucket where we're going to end up with those funds. And feel free to ask questions. Or if I'm talking too fast.
Nope.
Okay. So as we go to page 3, it says summary by department within fund. This gives you a little more detail of what the first 2 pages gave you. This gives you by department within that fund, what their activity is. So as you can see, city council, you don't bring me any money, so you're negative. Darn it. I know, it's like the clerk's budget. You don't bring in as much money, so you're always negative. It's terrible, but true. So as you go through, we have our general operating fund, which is our 01. As you can see, it's a positive 57,000 in total, which is great. We're anticipating being able to put a little bit of money back into our reserves that we have used in previous years. We want to make sure sometimes we put money back in and not always out.
Say that again for me.
So with the 57,668 is putting money into general fund reserves, which is good because in previous years we've had to use general fund reserves for emergency purposes, etc. So it's always good to put money back in it at times, not always be taking out of reserves. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
You know, a budget is just an estimate. Real life will throw us a curveball, I will guarantee you. But this is our best estimate as to what we know is happening. Again, the new grants we received are not included in these budgets because they are unknowns. Until we have the paperwork and sign them, even if we're like, yep, we're pretty positive, you know, we're 100% positive we're going to get it. Until we sign the documents, I don't put it in. The next grouping is our general fund donated. We never budget for revenue because donations are sporadic and unpredictable. Unless someone has given me a letter of intent or something, I wouldn't budget for the revenue. We're using our Crandall funds, which we use to pay the property tax on that one property on can't remember where exactly it's located. But we might come up with something that the council wants to do with those funds. Just going through here somewhat quickly, unless somebody has some questions.
I just have some questions and comments, really, just to point things out. And so we're looking at the general fund here on this page, right?
Correct.
And what I notice and what I'd like to point out is that I don't see projects on this page. This is the general operation of the city. And when we talk about projects, we talk about we need new revenue streams. So we're talking about possibly a new fire hall, and we've got approval. We have the consultant on board, and we're talking about doing a sales tax to bring that revenue in for that specific need. And then we have a number of capital expenditure projects, but they're tied to funding streams primarily through grants. And I know that pretty sure these two council members are very well aware of that, but I just want to point that out because I think a lot of people in the public, they just think, go spend $2 million on this thing, but that's just not how we operate. If we want to spend $2 million on something, we definitely can. But what we do is we spend a year planning on how we're going to go about doing that. First of all, do we need to do that? Does the public want us to do this thing? Now, what are the funding mechanisms to do this thing? Can we build a percentage of that cost into our general operating budget, which would be maybe a couple $100,000 in a good year? But ultimately, I'm just wanted to point out that we don't do projects within the general fund. We just operate the city.
That
Is
is
that
correct.
okay?
Yeah,
Thank you.
that is absolutely correct. That's something I think gets confused for sure.
Thank you, Jason.
I don't know, because I'm just new at this process for the city. Well, I'm gonna ask a question and feel free to say, we're gonna talk about that later. But I want to talk about the city council budget.
Yeah,
What is in that budget? I mean, what is
Oh.
that made up of?
that's
Go
a
to
great
your
question. Yeah.
expense detail by department, the very last section.
I knew you would have an answer.
But this is excellent. This is exactly what we want to do. It's just, you're going to guide the questions. If you don't have them, Emily will guide, just filling you in, but just, this is
Yeah, no,
exactly
this is
how
Perfect.
we learn.
Yeah. So the second box, you guys are 010, the department 010. So it's the second box and then the first box on the second page. So most of yours is simply just wages, and your benefits, taxes, all those good things. You do have some travel and conference meeting budget. You have special departmental supplies. So like when you onboarded and you got a phone and the tablet so you can do your job, those expenses would be booked there.
So it's the table on the bottom of the very first page.
Yes.
Yes.
And the table at the top of the second page.
2 of
Oh,
113.
no, just the bottom one.
2 of 113.
I can't see.
Emily, I brought up the line item budget as well.
Oh, thank you, Retta.
So, but where is any of our money that we give for events?
That's Department 090, which is located on.
Page 22.
Page 22.
Yeah, page.
Okay, down at the bottom.
Yeah, it looks like it's both top and bottom on mine.
Yeah. Yes. So 090, what we have in here is funds where for your special events. We also have our community assistance line, which is where we are putting all of our porta potties that have out for the homeless, for the unhoused. I apologize. And the trash that we take from them. We were previously booking it to parks because we really didn't know where to put it exactly. But I think as a city, we decided, let's keep it all in one spot. So we really can't identify what funds are we expending to try and assist with this situation.
I also want to point out here on the bottom table, you'll see the second item down is Chamber of Commerce, and we've loaded money here just in case we have the opportunity to have some organization, and also as things come up for the community or different items within the communications projects that we're working on. This is just a placeholder to have some money set aside to do some things that I think the council is interested in doing. It's not necessarily completely earmarked for a chamber contract.
So more specifically, is there one specific line item that reflects the city council saying, we want to give a stipend to the elves?
That's a great question.
There are kind of multiple lines, as you can see, as you go down.
I would,
Um,
yeah, I would say that 561.0, it's a community promotions.
yeah, all of the ones that say 560 as the account number, those are all those are your, we're giving money to XYZ entity.
So yeah, we're already giving certain monies away. And then I think community promotions is, since I've been here, I think we gave a lot of money to Grace Bennett for like a crossover between the museum and the Collier Rest Center
Yes.
for some maps, I think that she wanted printed. But this is where I think where Councilmember Baker's going here is we'd like to see some more control over the events and the waiving of fees. I think this is kind of what we've talked about, and setting up some structure within the budget to allot for that. And then that way, hey, we've already, it's kind of a first come, first served basis with the discretion of the council, but saying we've already run our course. It is now up to you to pay for the closure of the road, to compensate for the cost back to the city.
So up here in the top box where you have wages, etc., that is where we estimate what activities the public works is going to be obligated to do. So that $700 that you waive when they have to close the streets, this is where that's budgeted. Ben gives me a percentage of what time he thinks a public works crew is going to be used over the year. Does that make sense?
It does. And so I guess where I'm going with this, and again, if this is not the appropriate time, I know you guys will be very gentle with me and say, we'll talk about that another time. But we have, it looks like, if I'm looking at this, community promotions, we have a budget of $10,000. When we,
That- Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
when we hit that $10,000, then do you or Mr. Ledbetter come to the council and say, sorry, you've expended all that money?
We've attempted that in the past. And we would like to get to that point. Generally, what happens is that, you know, people want to fund things, the budget's been passed, and so then we have to kind of work within this budget to move money around or have the council vote to actually make an allocation, you know, but please.
Yeah,
if
no, that's
there's-
exactly right. Because this department is within the Fund 01. If we knew, say, Jason had planned on buying a new chair, and so he had it in his budget for $200 for a chair. And he decided, you know, my chair's fine. So he has extra budget of 200. And if the swim team came and said, I need $200, we could move that money and have you guys still vote on whether or not you want to spend it without going into reserves.
I'm sitting on a milk crate.
$200 will buy you a cheap chair.
It really is a
Try
cheap
about
chair, but I was
try
trying to
about
make a nice
1400.
example here.
And I don't want to come across as.
No, you're asking
you know,
very
it's
good
just-
questions.
This is something that I understand a little bit because we have funded a lot of community events, which is wonderful. I'm not opposed to that, but I also believe that we should have some limits on it. And so I really, is it okay to bring this idea up now?
Absolutely. This is exactly what we should be
Okay.
doing.
So, and Mr. Ledbetter, you and I have talked about this quite a few times, and I really like the way that you have kind of directed my thoughts, is that with community events, we should have everybody come and make a presentation at the same time. I mean, you know, everybody that wants to use Minor Street, so that we can plan that accordingly for the year, so that we really do have a realistic picture of how much money that we're spending. And it's not a matter of, you know, we're going to choose A over B. It's just, let's see what we're really spending. And when we've hit that number, we're done.
Absolutely. I think that what we have right now is just a lack of control. And even if we set guidelines for ourselves and decided maybe once or twice you guys wanted to break them, at least we would have guidelines. And so if you can look at that item, what you'll notice is look at the history of that.
Right.
So if we're only budgeting 10,000 in both years, well, guess what the actuals were in 22, 23?
Right.
So I kind of advocate that this idea be put into play either here and we make an alteration and then that's brought for approval. And that you think about the generalized cost. So I think we have it down to roughly $700 per event with just for road closure. That doesn't include the stage.
Correct.
Start thinking about how many events we know. We know that we have 3 events that generally we're going to waive that for: the parade, Gold Rush, and Night of Lights. So whatever that is, it's over $3,000, I'm assuming. Because what we have never done really is paid it back. And that's where we want to get with this money, is we want to pay the money back to Public Works. When it's waived, we take it out of this budget.
Right.
You guys are waiving it. That doesn't mean, that means the money is moving around somewhere, right? So otherwise, who loses is Public Works. And what does that mean? The parks lose. That's always
Right.
what that means. So yeah, we just think about, we can do the math now. I mean, you can just think about how many events, like, should this be upped? And this is what I advocate for, is that we wouldn't actually change the $291,000 here. That's why I have padded, or we have, kind of padded that 100 grand, is just say, hey, let's just take that to 90, or let's take that to 80. And let's say we're comfortable with $30,000 of community promotion, because community promotion is also going to be, name the group that comes in here and we want to help the YMCA with something, or we want to help some nonprofit do something and they're looking for a donation. Those are the feel good things that we do get to do. And so you're going to want money set aside, not just for the events.
Right.
Well, and just outside of just the events, the cost, the planning of these events, I have watched Public Works scramble, my office scramble to try to get everything together for this event that they tell us about 4 weeks before they want to do it. So if we make them all do it at one, hey, this is your meeting, okay, and then they can schedule out ahead of time everything that needs to be planned ahead and ready to go in plenty of time. So it'd be an efficiency cost for us as well.
Yeah.
And so that's that $700 that we know is the direct cost to Public Works. That doesn't take into account all the indirect costs, though, of the planning, of the staff time. And who pays for that? I mean, is that just
Finance.
Built into, like, kind of the idea that someone's going to be here for 40 hours a week and they were just redirected to do that function. So it gets eaten up by the administration.
Cost of doing business is what we call it in the private sector.
Yeah, and I have looked into, because we just expanding this conversation a bit, is we had talked after the council meeting about possibly creating a committee, or even
Yes.
talking to Matt had a great idea, just run it through the finance committee.
Yes.
Just like special events are approved by the finance committee. That way we can have people come in, we can have Public Works, we can be a lot more candid about the cost of things. Have the council give authority to this committee. That way you're in the middle of the day. It's not necessarily, we're just doing the business of the city at the meetings, the city council meetings. But the only issue that we're running into, having investigated a little bit further, is that there's a lot of muni code verbiage that needs to get changed, because the authority to allow camping at Greenhorn has to come by resolution. And we have an event from Rotary that does camping at Greenhorn for the bike event. And then some of the drinking that happens, or the liquor licensing or to have drinking at an event, is in our muni code, built into you guys passing the council passing a resolution. So unfortunately, we can't immediately change. We have to, I mean, as you will hear and have already heard, we have to update the entire muni code, which is going to take many years. But this one, these things need to be thought about before we can move. And as you know, it's an ordinance change. So
Yeah, And I would just, you know what, I understand, I think what I want to say is I understand the legalities really well, but I would hate to see us be reluctant to make changes in our processes because it's also going to take a change of some verbiage in an ordinance. I mean, that's why we have council. And it would just, in the ideal world of Colleen Baker, we approve these events. We know that ordinance number 27 needs to be updated. So bam, we've got the approval of the ordinance, and then we've got the approval of the event. And maybe that doesn't work in the real world, but that's the bubble world of Colleen Baker.
We can do it. It's not at the end of the world. It's just, it's going to take more time than, unfortunately, like I would love to say all special events now go to this committee, but we can't do that
Not
at the
gonna
moment
happen.
based off of the Muni code. But we have maybe 6 or 7 updates that have to get made to allow this group just to make those decisions, which I think is what we should do. And so I think maybe really it should be maybe introduced, if you agree with that, at a future city council meeting. Direct me at the end during your commentary to move in that direction. That way the rest of the council is aware and to make sure that they're on board with that. I'd hate to start that process and bring them an ordinance and have them be not on board. It would be a waste of our time, but I'm pretty sure it would be.
Is there any reason we can't? First, special events have to come to the finance committee for recommendation to the council as a first step.
That's a great idea. We can absolutely do that. You know, I like that because then just on consent, everything is really, it's just approved.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, we don't have, so when you want to come up and talk about the event, that happens here. And then you don't even need to come to the city council meeting. Once approved here, it's kind of, we know it's going to be on the consent agenda. It definitely will. I mean, you guys will just have to stay strong because it's going to make the process slower, which is what we want, because what we're getting right now is people that want an 8-week, 6-week, 4-week turnaround time,
Right.
which is really like, hey, drop everything that you're doing, which is what we get with a lot of folks, is just wanted to drop things. So I like that idea. I think that's a quick fix.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
in the meantime, until we can get that ordinance going and have that authority.
Yeah.
We give that recommendation to council of, yep, that's a good to go. We recommend that we waive the fee or no, we don't.
Yeah, because we can call a finance committee meeting whenever we want.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And another benefit of that I'm seeing is we get to identify ahead of time where the holes are in the paperwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so we're
Not-
not having, we're having vendors.
yes, a week before the event.
Yeah. I'm in the back and I'm like, he said he wasn't bringing any vendors. Like,
Well, yeah, and I think also it's a little bit more relaxed in this environment. And so it's a lot to we look like obstructionists when we're saying that this isn't feasible or that this is not appropriate or that it is a big ask for public works. Ben Miller is always going to tell you yes.
Yeah.
That's just who he is. So I like it here where we can have candid conversations about the effect it will have on staff and whether or not it is an investment the city wants to make.
So then do you want to do like quarterly cattle calls? So that we know in advance and have them come here to speak to us, let them know if they don't, then they're not going to be approved.
I think we'd like to get there and maybe then this becomes the mechanism, the finance committee to kind of draft that plan. First and foremost, I think we're still going to get the request. So I don't know if we can stick to our guns to tell someone no.
well, maybe
We only
just,
we only
as-
have 2 votes here out of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know that Colleen and I could hold the line with Drake and Dwayne and Corey, honestly, having been on here for,
Well, because a lot of the events are friends. I'll get, you know.
They're
text
friends,
from
yes, everybody's
somebody,
friendly.
Hey, my buddy wants to do an event and
'Cause
so it
I think,
is-
I think a cattle call like Colleen is talking about is a good thing. And you could do it quarterly.
yeah, we would like to get exactly to that point where we're saying
And
you
when-
have to come into our meeting, you have to be,
And we're not going to change it.
yeah.
Our time is as valuable as theirs.
All right. Well, I think that clarifies just the process side. And so if we can have this discussion on the 15th at the end of, if either of you can bring it up, if not, I can bring it up during your guys' commentary. And then that will give us direction to move forward with something and then start the process to get the calls to the public to come into our meetings. And then I know that Jasenia and whoever takes over is going to be very happy about this. And then that way we can kind of revert back to just talking about numbers.
Yeah.
And Councilwoman Baker, I would be, if you bring it up, I will be, you need two people to put it on the agenda, to ask them to put on the agenda, and I will back you on that.
Thank you.
And once I tell you that I'm gonna do something, I will do it. I'll tell you if I'm not gonna do, if I'm not gonna do it, so. I will back
Yeah.
you on that. I will be the second person to ask to put on the agenda.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a real positive step forward.
Yeah.
I mean, bottom line is the more organized it is, the less time is less money spent.
Yes.
Well, knowing in advance is, even though we know it's gonna be about this time, or it's about this time of year, knowing in advance is helpful to the businesses.
It's helpful,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's just really helpful to have you guys so on board with this because I think you'll see how time consuming this process turns out to be with
Mhm.
getting it organized to bring to you guys. So.
So I think
Yeah.
just the process in this room.
Yeah, be ready for some special events at the next council meeting.
There's like 3 or 4 coming, yeah.
4 special events are coming to the council.
That's not the time to do it. We need to do the business of the city and not the business of everybody else at the council.
A couple of them are actually being proactive, like Night of
Yes.
Lights, maybe.
Night of
Yeah.
Lights is proactive. The Art Hop is being proactive. She has like a whole year of schedule of what she wants to do, which is helpful. The other 2 are a little last minute, like real last minute. One is a kids block party and the other is a fashion show.
Liberty Arts.
Yes.
They're on the same day, which is helpful. So they both want to shut the road down and they're going to split the cost of that.
So that's a lot of events.
Thank you.
And I just have one other thing.
Absolutely.
And again, it's not related, specifically, I don't think it is related to the budget. And that is, I really would like to see us to have a process in place for any of the city events that the city sponsors, like the holiday parade. I really would like to see us get to the point where we can just put out, I'm going to use RFP. It doesn't have to really, that's the process. Put out a notice to all of the organizations, all of the nonprofits, and set the stipend from the city. We're going to offer $6,500 for any organization that wants to put on this event on behalf of for the city of Yreka. And then give people from different organizations the opportunity to say, hey, we'd like to try that this year. And I am not dissing on any organization that's done it in the past. It's just that I really think that we should give like all the nonprofits an opportunity to step forward and go, hey, we'd like to do that. It can make up for money that they've lost with fireworks.
But technically and legally, we don't sponsor any of the events. That's the issue. We do not sponsor them. We don't say sponsored by, we don't claim that we sponsor them.
So-
These are just 3 events that council recognized that they wanted to be involved with. They wanted to see them continue to go on. There were other events when we looked at this. I don't know if you were on at the time or not, or whether it was just Steve, because I know this has gone, with the council dropping the chamber because they didn't want to pay the $65,000 in total fees, and we were getting really nothing for it. They said, well, what if you had to keep something, what do you want to keep? And the council at the time said, well, these are the 3 we'd like to see go on every year. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not in disagreement on what the councilwoman is saying, but I'm just saying, we don't sponsor them.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can, by pulling in this discussion into the finance committee meeting, we can kind of flesh out. I mean, I will say that I would like to see it go actually in a different direction, which is kind of how I've worked my angle, was to get you know, these events are important to the city is what I was told. I was kind of told.
That's
2 months
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're like 2 months before one of the events, you know, that we needed to do this event. And so my take is to get it out of the nonprofit hands. And that's why Discover Siskiyou, who has to spend T-bid money anyway.
And that, yeah.
Yeah, so they've taken 2 of our events and really they could take another one, but right now the folks that do the holiday parade are so dedicated to maintaining the date. Where in the world I live in, and you know, I'm a young 44, right? So I'm just a young buckaroo. It should be on the same day. The holiday parade should lead right into the Night of Lights. I mean, that just makes the most amount of sense to me. That's what I would do if, you know, taking my son downtown, and then I would have $20,000 going to Discover Siskiyou to do that event where they would turn around and make it a $60,000 event, you know, and make it bigger. And then that way the name of the city are kind of on these events, and that way you can guarantee the success because you're removing it from the nonprofit world. And when you have it in the nonprofit world, sometimes it is just to get the funding, not necessarily to spend on the event, but to compensate themselves for future projects that they would like to do. They're relying on volunteers. And then I understand that concept, but then revolving around the event now becomes completely different. Like every year, the event all of a sudden has a different flair to it. And I would advocate to kind of try to get, if we do kind of consider it a city event, to get it into the hand, like to budget for it. Try to make it a regional event, not just an event for the community, but an event that pulls people in from other areas, make a spectacle of it. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's what Gold Rush Days and Night of Lights is kind of veering into. They're becoming bigger events. I believe they're becoming nicer events, but that's my 2
I
cents.
like that. I like the way that you are looking at that versus me.
Well, because the Elks could do a parade if they wanted to, you know, I feel like this morning, so they could do one of those cruise nights, right?
Yeah,
Like do the
absolutely.
old classic car cruise night or something. Like we'll shut the road down for that, and it's their event. It's not our event, but I can pontificate all day. Ask any one of my employees.
I'm like, gotta go.
Stuck in Jason's office again.
Anyway, thank you. I appreciate the time that we've taken for this discussion.
Absolutely.
And so thank you.
This is your meeting and your questions, etc. So we kind of talked about fund balances. That's a great place to look at each department and see what activities are going on. One of the major expenses to the city, as we all know, is employees.
Yep.
Salary and benefits. And that is summarized.
Salaries and positions.
Yes, salary and positions. And if we go all the way to the back of that section, the last 2 pages are the snapshot of what our salary and benefits are for each department. And sorry, we're under the red tab, salary and benefits. I
Got
kind of
it.
hopped around on you there, sorry. This really is this snapshot, excuse me, of what does it cost to run that department with just the personnel. So as you can see, the different departments are listed all the way to the right. The second to last column is your total salary and benefits. So that's your pension funding, that's your healthcare, that's your workman's comp, that's your taxes, all that good stuff that gets good employees here. This is what it's costing us. So for the city in total is $10,289,674.
When you say that includes your statutory costs, does it include all pension? Are we still having, we'll have to cover more after that?
No, this is, go ahead, Ren.
It includes the minimum UAL.
Thank you. Thank you.
So as you can see, our general fund is 6.3 million. Of that, 3.2 is our police department.
So it's, half.
Half of
That's a lot.
our general, yeah, it is a lot.
That's why it's imperative for firemen, for fire hall and for firemen and for growth in the city. And I don't mean growth like of 10,000 people. I mean growth of like 500 or 600 people in the next 10 years. It's imperative to have we have to have another funding mechanism, and the most fair way to do it is through some kind of sales tax.
Absolutely. It's, a fire department will mirror very closely with the police department as
Yes.
far as wages go.
Absolutely.
They will be very similar.
Thank you.
That's true. And I mean, just so everyone's clear, though, we're not talking about 100% paid fire staff. We're talking about a percentage of paid and volunteers. So,
Yeah, just like in the study that was done.
yeah.
Mirroring somewhat the study that was done, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So some reminders of what's included in here. The clerk position
Mhm.
has been added, the wastewater operator and the wastewater and water operators. The addition of those two positions, which would position ourselves to upgrade to a level 4 plant that we're teetering on needing to be anyway. So we want to make sure we're prepared to become a full water operator. Takes 4 or 5 years. There's a lot of testing
think it's
involved to
4
be
years, yeah.
certified to be an operator. So if we have one that leaves us unsuddenly, it's really hard to find these guys that already have the certification and have the appropriate qualifications. So we want to make sure that we're covered and we're ready to handle that 500 people growth over 10 years.
Yeah, over 10 years or 15. I mean, it's not like we're gonna, and I noticed they're flown. I've seen them actually on Facebook. So just send
Jasenia.
flew them on. So that's nice. People are out there seeing them.
Yeah, we're trying to circulate on Facebook, et cetera, reach as
Yeah.
many people as we can. It's a great job to get in on the ground floor, for sure.
Be wonderful for somebody, especially somebody young with a family
Yeah.
that's gonna stay here.
So those were kind of the highlighted ones I wanted to just point out of, hey, here's our salary, is there specific questions anybody has or direction you'd like me to dive into more?
I did want to make a clarification.
Oh, thank
To
you.
follow up to Councilmember McCoy's question, and that is the budget does include in the column CEPPT an additional contribution to our pension trust fund.
Thank you.
That ever looming UAL,
Yeah,
we are
yeah,
constantly thinking about.
That's something that this committee needs to be very concerned with and in being diligent. And you know that I've spoke to the city manager and to yourself about it. We need to be diligent about watching it and about attempting to fund that over the next certainly long after I'm gone, probably for over the next 7 to 10 years.
Absolutely.
Needs to be-
It
It's gonna need to
is-
be funded.
It is the looming.
And yeah, I know we are funding it, we're working toward it, but I know in my previous job, I think it took us about 7 to 10 years to fund it. It was something like that.
And that UAL is an ever moving target.
Yep.
As people retire, as we hire people on different age groups, that
Absolutely.
changes how much that number is.
Well, we have to
Close the gap.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Paul. We need to close the gap.
Yeah, and I
you're-
just theoretically, philosophically want to say something. I worked with a gentleman at one point who told me his philosophy on what a private business, and in this instance, I'll just use the city. Our responsibility, in my opinion, is to employ as many people in our community as possible. We offer a great job. And when I look at this budget, as I said before, projects, the funding comes from somewhere else. If we're able to grow a little bit, or we see some more retail, some strategic retail development that we've talked internally about, and we have money coming in, I look at the responsibilities of these departments on how am I going to provide better service. I know that my pool budget is 0, and I know that needs to grow, right? Because we're going to fix Ringy Pool. So I know that I have a cost there. I know that my parks budget, I can offer a better park to the community. If I have more funding coming in, I could hire 4 more people, and we could have the nicest parks in Northern California thereby being a better community to live, thereby attracting more money and more people to come into the community. So I always look at this, I just philosophically and letting you guys know, and I guess trying to sway you as well, is that reinvesting the revenue coming into the existing things that we already have to make them substantially better is a good philosophy, rather than being like my son who wants everything new, need an Xbox instead of a Nintendo Switch now. So that's just philosophically how I look at it, because we do have all of these things. We have a community center, a community theater, we have the chamber, right? It's just, there's a lot of things that could be improved that offer a higher level of pride to the community, including our parks, that we should, in my opinion, when we look at general operating fund and more money coming in, we should just say, hey, instead of starting some specialized amphitheater idea or something, let's go ahead and reinvest into the parks. Let's fix the horseshoe pits so that they're more usable. Let's do programming at the parks with the YMCA so we can have Tai Chi for people, or we can have kids, we'll have events at Greenhorn on a more consistent basis, because we always hear there's nothing to do. Well, we know that's not true, but that's how I look at, if we have more money coming in, reinvesting it into the departments that we already existingly have. I don't know.
One of the budgets I want you not to be nervous about is our planning budget is a lot higher this year than it was in the previous year. That's because of the general plan. We knew that was going to happen. It's a 40-year cost that we knew was coming. Juliana is actively looking for different grant funding to offset some of those costs. The IT budget, we are dispersing back equitably to the departments, as well as the HR budget. Just trying to think of what other highlights I had.
I would hope code enforcement is gonna be higher probably, so. So we shouldn't be worried about that either, because we need to do code enforcement. In the past, we have put nothing, before Jason came, I think we maybe put, $1,000, $2,000 into code enforcement, when we wanted to do something, and it was something that our old city manager talked about putting more money into, so we shouldn't be worried about that either.
I think before I came on, you guys rectified that, may have been in the gap there, because I think that you're giving, is it $100,000 into the abatement?
We gave $100,000 to the abatement fund. That is meant to be a reimbursed fund. So
Okay.
once State Street, once a property is done and we've cleaned it and sold it, we should be recouping our costs, and that will go right back into that fund for availability for the next property that needs assistance.
Yeah, realistically, my understanding is that we don't recoup our money. We recoup maybe 40 to 60% of it.
I always have my fingers crossed. We'll at least get most of it.
That was part of the thing in the past, was that, well, we're not gonna get that much out of this.
It's still worth the effort if it looks
Oh,
better,
I
in
absolutely,
my opinion.
it's worth the effort if it, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not arguing with you on that. I'm with you 100%, Emily.
So, Mr. Ledbetter, I have another question.
Yeah.
Any of the positions that are created, using grant funding, do those positions go away when the grant funding goes away?
Yeah, we have like this resiliency officer position that we just got funded. To me, that position is a contracted position for 5 years that would receive whatever salary was written into the grant application. Then they would get a COLA. In my opinion, we'd give them a COLA, but it would be very explicit that after 5 years, that position would be removed unless we were able to get a grant. And if we did not get a grant, my thought process is it would be part of the educational campaign of a position that we would maintain and fund through a tax on the fire department, because I would have that position and transition into, instead of hazard mitigation, strictly fire mitigation, and then be the administrative role of the fire department. But yeah, if it's a grant funded position, it should disappear. But Retta, has engaged this process through the city. I mean, is that accurate for the historical Retta or?
So their agreement would reference that it ends. However, they have 5 years to create strategic opportunities for themselves in the organization.
Okay, thank you.
So you have your, yeah, so those, the salary and positions, the changes in those departments that have been made. Not all of those changes were made just for this budget that you're approving right now. They were made along the way. Because we are doing a 2-3 year 2-year budget, sorry, not 3-year.
Mhm.
A 2-year budget. So the council does make decisions in between that we adjust for at that time. And then so it's not, it's kind of a weird reflection, if that makes sense. For example, the assistant city manager, council approved that. So when you're looking at change to change, it's not, I'm not adding it as a new one. You already added it in the previous year, if that makes sense.
I'm just gonna let that sink in for a
Okay.
while. Yes.
I didn't explain that very clearly, just so you know. But we do have the historic of, how the positions changed over the years. What's been added, what's been taken away. And then our comprehensive annual salary schedules. And then, of course, we have a number of part-time employees that we employ on the regular. And it's just the ranges for them.
I feel like I'm
No,
Just
go for it.
ask.
Please do.
lots and lots of questions that maybe are not specific to numbers, but Mr. Ledbetter, each department has goals and for 24 and 25, and are those tied to job performance evaluations? Are those created in collaboration with you, or?
Yeah, that's a great.
The Siskiyou County Clerk.
That's it. Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, that's something that we've strategically done since I've got here is do the reviews, striving to meet the goals, I mean, of the organization. So, a lot of Matt's goals should be based around water and sewer, obviously. I mean, I say water security, but water security for me includes the sewer improvements. And, fiscal resiliency with the finance department, and obviously the 218 and the fees, those are part of Emily's goals, and so yes, in my opinion, I have kind of, we will, in a perfect world, wanted to come to you when you first got on to talk about strategic planning, but really want to get this budget passed and kind of show you what your strategic plan somewhat kind of looks like currently before we all of a sudden change complete direction. So when I came in here talking to staff, talking to the community and understanding the history and what the council was striving for, we kind of internally just came up with the 4 goals that are in the budget. This is how I've interpreted my role here, which is fiscal resiliency, right? So we have to have a strategic revenue plan, which is that thing you guys generally see on the whiteboard in there, what Emily, Juliana, and Retta really put together organically one day in this room. And we've done a number of those things, and we have a number that is still that we want to do. The next one that's really on the list is the 218 and the fire tax. And then water security, obviously, we've gotten the council to bring in a different attorney who specializes in water. We have made a ton of headway on our water permit, understanding the different opportunities that we have within water, and then the state hitting the state revolving funds, which was already happening before I got here. Really, Matt was already really hitting those with Pace Engineering. Fire was one that was kind of We didn't necessarily, we never really ventured into fire grants. So Retta getting those 2 grants that we just got, George Jennings is he's over the moon at the moment because the city never engaged. It was always the Fire Safe Council doing these items on the periphery or CAL FIRE. And so we have those grants and obviously this whole plan over the fire hall and paid fire staff. And then housing, that was something that just really coincided perfectly with the housing element. And then the housing, I always just break it into it. It just includes homeless or unhoused. And so those were kind of slam dunks in my opinion, whereas like if we just did this for 10 years, this would be a really nice city. We would improve the infrastructure. But I think that we're lacking an economic development strategic plan. And I think that's something that we need to start to develop. And that's something internally we're talking about already, where after we get some housing stood up, we need to go into commercial redevelopment. We have this Shop Smart building here. We have Cooley and Pollards. We have a number of empty vacant lots that need infill or buildings that possibly can get torn down and rebuilt. And so that was part of my interest in going to Shasta Lake City because they're really notorious here regionally for doing very well in the planning department. They have a really beefed up community development department, and they received a huge grant to do economic redevelopment. And so that's kind of my vision. But then as soon as we get this passed, my plan is to bring you what your strategic plan looks like currently, and then just kind of formulate what's to come, how, what are the things that we're missing, and then just start planning that out with you guys, but still maintain knocking some of these big projects off. And the biggest one really that is going to be the heaviest lift that everyone is going to need to be on is the fire hall, the fire tax. I mean, that is going to eat really, in my opinion, from now until the election in November of 24. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, so ultimately, yeah, we have, that's one thing, as I said earlier, I'm just really chatty today, but it's a real group. It is a group mentality here. There's no compartmentalization that happens. There is a ton of, we have our active, weekly department head meeting. And then beyond that, there's just constant communication. People are just in each other's offices constantly around here, sharing ideas, really driving these 4 goals forward. And so somebody could exit and nothing's going to change. Like, we are aware of what everyone is doing, I guess, is the key. And I think that's really important, because if that doesn't happen, then what happens is, what's this person doing? Like, another department all of a sudden hates another department because they're like, they're lazy, they're not doing anything. But, it's just like communicating, hey, this is what Cindy's working on. This is what Jasenia's working on. Everybody is very well aware of what people are doing and why we're doing it. And we try to incorporate that into a Friday meeting that we have with the floor staff and admin, where we tell them what we're doing. Hey, this is the priority. They know the 4 priorities that we're working on and what projects are coming up. And what we're attempting to do here is not just maintain the status quo. It is to make drastic improvements to the community. So
I have to mirror that because I have worked in other entities, and the lack of communication, the lack of letting finance know, hey, we're working on this, and I don't see it until I have an invoice and I'm like, what's this? Well, what we doing? And so it really does help that I can strategize ahead of time and have the appropriate accounting set up for it. So it's a big project. We want to make sure we're tracking it appropriately. It's that communication. And, Retta is brilliant in her ability to be like, oh, we have this over here, and that can pay for that, and that can help with this. And then we can put those 2 together and get the whole project done. And I'm like, oh, I didn't put all of those pieces together. So that communication is key within this city, that we are all very well aware of what is happening.
yeah, and poor Retta, it cracks me up because we'll be sitting around and we'll be game planning some direction that we want to go. And then, we'll leave the meeting and I'll get an email in an hour or so from Retta, and it'll be an email from 7 years ago. And it'll be exactly the same thing she was advocating to do that we just came up with. And so it validates kind of a lot of the things she wanted to do and the fact that we also want to do them. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
All
but you are correct. I mean, that is the goal. And so instead of having these arbitrary reviews that don't mean anything, because I've worked at Super Target, I've worked at Starbucks, I've worked at Safeway, I worked at Albertsons. I've had those reviews and got my quarter raise, you know? And so here it is really focused on, mine are more goal oriented. And so if you meet those goals, the city wins really, and you're fulfilling the strategic goal of the city. And so right now, you know, to dive a little bit deeper, but when we start talking and really truly planning economic redevelopment for the city, we're going to talk about how that influences public works. Because we have an area of town that needs to see a drastic improvement to the sewer system before we can see the amount of retail that really the area is probably going to drive after this Highway 3 improvement. And so rather than planning all of this development and then getting people coming in to do it, and then all of a sudden having some exorbitant cost on the developer who's not going to want to pay it, we need to go make improvements to that area, time that out, and then have a strategy for after the infrastructure goes in. So if that makes sense, I guess my point is that it won't just be planning, it'll be public works.
Right.
So
But having a plan is the key.
that is the key. And I'd say, yeah.
Having a plan is the key.
Yes.
Don't know who Esther is, but thank you for calling. So those were really the highlights I wanted to hit. I didn't know if you guys had had time to look at anything or had any specific questions. It really is diving into those things. Something I did want to touch upon, our LAIF account has been a very popular topic lately.
What life account?
Our bank account, our LAIF,
Everybody
It's-
thinks we got money.
everybody thinks we have money because there's a large sum in there. But what we need to remember is that we have policies in place that say we have to have a certain percentage of our operating budget in savings at all times. We have loan reserves that require us to have certain amount of money set aside. We have requirements, you know, on our loans, like that if we don't, we default with USDA, which is bad. Which is real bad. Retta has had these policies set up of specific reserves that need to be set aside. The council has voted and approved on them. We are following those guidelines. So when the general public says, oh, you have 25 million sitting in the bank. Well, we do, but the majority of that is designated to specific purposes that we cannot use that in any other function. I think you guys know that and understand that. But I want to make sure that people understand that it's not just this pot of money that's available to spend on whatever we feel like. It has designated purposes.
But the average citizen has to understand that the reason that this city is in the financial positive financial position that it is in is because of that money. If we decide to go ahead and spend that money, whether, you know, willy-nilly for $1 million or $2 million for this and $1 million or $2 million for that, all of a sudden, we are no longer in that financial position. And we certainly don't want to get downgraded as the US government did yesterday in on our financial capacity. So
Absolutely.
we want to stay where we are, and that is just sound financial capacity to keep that money there in life for heaven forbid something that might happen.
Absolutely, because it makes us more attractive for future grants. It gives us the ability to go for future loans as needed by demonstrating that we are, I can't think of the word.
Solvent.
There you go.
But let me just expand on that for a moment, because Retta mentions this quite a bit, and really we see this increase in staff right over the last 10 years in the city, which has been really a blessing for everybody to give better service because we've have increased staff. You guys, you know, you before I came along got a HR director. That was a position that never existed, you know, in the past. And so when we have this extra staff and we're bringing on the resiliency officer. We have an assistant city manager. And really, once we get the clerk position, and I mean, Retta always talks about, I want triple the amount of money coming in than it costs the city to have me here. Well, she's done that very, and then some. But what we need to do is go after more grant funding, right? You have to have a grant strategy. How much money can you get coming in? But there's risk involved there, and you can only float so much because normally they don't send, like for the pool, that was always a big, people just misunderstood. We didn't get a check for $8.5 million. What we were going to have to do is we're going to have to float $8.5 million. And then we were going to have to prove out our compliance to what we did. And we were going to have to send invoices to the granting agency, and then they would send us that same amount of money back if it was compliant. And so what we're doing is we're paying for that with this money. And you can't have $100 million worth of grants out there and only have a general operating fund of, $9 million. It's just not going to, it's not going to work. So I'm just advocating for continuing to go after grants, but also understanding you need to have money set aside in the bank, because it's not just money in, money out. It's money out and you wait a very long time and then the money comes back in.
Yeah, mom and dad aren't just handing it to us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So. No, I appreciate that. The people don't understand, and, and they don't understand the long-term things that you are dealing with, like the USDA. Like we're looking at this pool, and we're very grateful that the city manager has adopted this as a project, and grateful to the city council for approving the money the way they did, and not affecting our bottom line right now. But we know it's a long term. It's probably, I mean, I say 10 years out, Jason says, 5 to 7, but I mean, it's going to be out there for a while. So the council is very appreciative of that and of what you're doing. We are appreciative of our assistant city manager, whom the council, I've been on 5 years. The council been asking for 7 years for an assistant city manager, and finally we got one, and we're very pleased with Retta. And we're pleased with the money that's coming in and the fact that all these projects are on the board. I mean, I'm sure the Burgess Street people are just over the moon. I mean, maybe they won't be when as construction continues, but once it's done, they'll be over the moon. So, it looks, it's a very good budget. Remember, we do a 2-year budget. We do not have to do a 2-year budget. We can do a 1-year budget if we want. According to a past city manager, cities in California don't even have to have a budget. I've never heard that, but that's what a past city manager said, that they're not even responsible to have a budget. So I think we are way ahead of the game. And I like this budget. Councilman Baker, I don't, what says you?
I have to just give you guys, I don't have the words to say how fortunate I feel the city of Yreka is to have the administrative staff at the city that we do. And I'm just amazed at the great job that you guys do, and the forethought and the big picture thinking and down the road. And I'm just really impressed. I'm really impressed with this budget. Do I know all the intimate details of it? No, but I don't think that that's really important to know every single minute detail, because that is your job.
Absolutely.
And, we're here to support you guys and to make sure the city is heading in a positive direction for the citizens. And we are. And so I think, Mr. Ledbetter, you should just go ahead, and we're going to give you a vacation next week.
Thank you very much.
We're granting you vacation.
Take a well-deserved vacation.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Very kind words. I mean, I think there is a mental health issue in the city of Yreka, quite frankly. We have a lot of employees that obsess over their job, and ultimately that is a huge benefit to the city. We have people that, it's not uncommon to see emails flying around on a weekend over some idea or some grant that's available, because people are so dedicated to making this place better, and it is happening. I do see that it's happening. I just want to point out, since we do have Skip in the audience, that one of the major, very simple ways to look at the budget is that there are some enterprise funds here, and that the water fund and the wastewater fund, which was very well pointed out by Andrew Jared, our attorney, that the city of Bell was taking that money and illegally giving themselves incredible raises or spending that money in an elsewhere, right? And so, you know, a portion of that money on some percentage hits my salary, right? Because some of my job is overviewing or reviewing the state revolving fund grants that we're getting. And so the city does a very good job of that, but we don't have access to that money to just go spend on some project. And really, that money is not indicative of the true cost to run a wastewater plant or the true cost to run water distribution. The state revolving grant funds that are 100% funded at the moment, if we did not have those, the cost of doing business for water would be tenfold what we
Astronomical.
currently charge. So, but my point is that we just, some of these accounts that people see, as pointed out with the LAIF, we don't have access in the way that people think we have access to spend it. It's just very specific. And I know everyone here is aware of that, and I believe Skip's aware of that too, but I just thought I'd mention it.
Well, I think that's an important part, an important point to make, so. If we're done with that, we're gonna go on. We have one more item. And then I think it's is it 5A and B? The review of a newly released pension actuarial report and pension funding levels.
Yes, we received our actuarial reports Monday, I believe. So we'll be
Okay.
bringing them back at a future meeting. There has been some fluctuations from last year, like I mentioned earlier. You hire, you fire, people die,
You're
you know,
seeing it moving toward.
it's that moving target.
Yeah.
That we continue to adjust the budget to try and address as best as possible. Nothing too scary, I don't think. But you know, we did have some fluctuation. So we'll go over that more in depth at the next finance committee meeting.
Okay. Any thought on that? Because I'm gonna go on another, any thought on that? I appreciate that, because I know I've been asking you and the city manager, I know things aren't gonna, you probably get tired of hearing me say it. I know things aren't gonna change, but I know that, every so often we wanna not look at it. You look at it every day. We wanna bring it up.
Oh, yeah.
So that we're aware of it and then see if there's anything we can do to backfill that. So the second item on there would be 5B is a draft utility rate study and 218 procedures.
Yes, we are still working with Pace on refining our rate study, knowing that we're asking for a fire tax coming, knowing that, inflation, et cetera. We really wanted to make sure we fine tune that and see if we can get that less than what we originally were thinking. So we're making sure that we're dialing that in as tight as possible. And with a new attorney, we have new procedures of how to process the 218. I personally have never gone through the 218 process. I know Retta has in the past, but we're not sure if our attorneys are going to recommend some changes in that process. So we want to bring those to you for your edification and your knowledge. And so you know what we're doing.
Okay. Anything to add or any questions? Any questions at all? Well, before I close, I want to add something, and that is that from somebody sitting on the outside, prior to being on the council, I could look at this city or any other city and see, that we pay X amount of sales tax and that goes to the city, and we pay, X amount of this goes to the city. And I could easily be very critical of this city or any other city. But after sitting on this council for 5 years, the one thing I can look at, and Finance Director Aldrich just alluded to that, is that this city really does run fairly lean. And as far as the money that it spends, fire department does a wonderful job. And I've told them that specifically, and they know it. Police department does a wonderful job. And although at $3.2 million, that's a lot of the budget, but I really don't see them being overfunded. That's just me. I'm one committee member's opinion. I don't see them being overfunded. And I think that the city is doing a lot more. And I think they're doing so much more than when I came on 5 years ago. And although there are more people in the office, they're getting more done than, I guess, more than I've ever dreamed that they would do. So I want to commend the city itself and everybody at the city for looking out for taxpayer money and not trying to overspend and waste money. I really applaud all of you because I think you do a fabulous job. And I know that, again, a lot of us, myself included, would want to say, oh, no, you're just, you got plenty of money, blah, 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 blah. You guys, every penny that I pay to you that goes to you, you guys are very careful, and ladies, at how you spend it. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and just to make a kind of an example of that is when the Matt Bray, the Public Works Director, philosophy on purchasing vehicles. Well, when you see folks driving around town in the very, 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 very old trucks, those are Parks and Roads employees that are paid out of the general fund, right? And so
The last one.
we get the funding for the grant funding to get a vehicle into water or wastewater. And then when the useful life of the grant allows that vehicle to be transferred, we transfer it into the general fund. And so we're not out there buying brand new vehicles for half of the staff, really. They're just getting the old vehicles because it is the lowest cost to the general fund. And so that's a philosophy that really helps kind of save the general fund budget.
Well, I thank you all, and it's 3:16, and this finance committee meeting is adjourned.